Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic Podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 83.
Ben, do you remember when you came of age?
Like when I became a man?
Yeah. In your mind, when did you become a man?
Probably when I was a full-time missionary. It was my first time being away from home. I was taking care of myself. I was living, 19.
Okay. You know what? I agree with you. When I left home and I went to college, I really felt like I was out on my own. First time you had to really take care of yourself and accept all this extra responsibility. But that's because neither one of us is Jewish. If we were devout Jewish, then that would have happened when we turned 13 years old. Period.
Bar mitzvah.
And so it's a bar mitzvah.
Or bat mitzvah.
It's a bar mitzvah if it's a boy, and it's a bas mitzvah if it's a girl. So they still have... It's
Oy
the same.
vey.
Oy vey. It's the same. It's a mitzvah. Everybody's going to get a mitzvah. Whether it's bar or bas is determined by your gender or gender identity. I don't know how that's working in the Orthodox Jewish sect. I don't know. But here's the interesting thing that I discovered is apparently in Jewish, I don't want to call it lore. That seems derogatory, but like in just Jewish scripture, there you go. They define like a lifetime as 70 years. And so what has become popular now is as healthcare increases and as people are living longer lives, people are having a second bar or bat mitzvah when they turn 83 because they figure they closed out like the first
there
lifetime
it
at 70.
The number 83.
And then they turn 13 again in a second lifetime at 83. And welcome to 83.
Wow, that was fascinating. That was way better than I was expecting for 83.
You say that like every time. Like
it's gonna be a party that you have with your friends, almost like the one you did when you were 13. But now you're celebrating that. Oy vey, I'm still alive. I can't believe it.
The chair that they hoist you up in might be a wheelchair, and you might have to hold on a little tighter.
That's great. Cool. Well, while we're talking about cultural artifacts, on episode 82, you mentioned a dish that was part of my wife's childhood, and when you said the name of it, it went one ear and out the other with me, and her ears perked up, and she's like, "Did they just say bierox?" I'm like, "I think so, but I didn't know what word he said, so I just moved on with my life." She's like, "I think they said bierox."
Yes, we said bierox. My wife made like 100 of them. We still have several bags of them frozen in the freezer. They keep for like 2 months.
So it's like a bread pouch with like cabbage and ground beef, seasoned ground beef inside?
Yes, I talked about it at length in the previous episode.
But did you know that there's a restaurant chain in Nebraska that sells these?
That I did not know.
Yeah, it's called Runza. So I can't think of when this would ever happen, but if you're ever driving through I-80 in Nebraska, there's about 3 consecutive rest stops where you'll see a Runza restaurant beside the freeway. And if you get off and go there, all they serve is bierox.
Excellent.
Do they have all different flavors and kinds?
I would expect nothing less. Now, do they have honey mustard available for me to dip my bierox into?
I'm sure they do, and I bet it's probably not expired.
Ha! Deep cut.
Josh, speaking of things that are expired, you're coming up on your expiration date for when you have to have passed your final certified professional accountancy exam. How's that going?
You jerk. You have to bring this up on the podcast.
The listeners want to know.
Inquiring minds must know. Now, there was a couple episodes back where I apologized because my brain was mush because I had just taken the exam that day. And I found out earlier this week the scores were finally released online. I was able to log in and see. And I am happy to announce that, yes, I did pass the last exam.
That is awesome. Congratulations, buddy.
Thank you. I've got all 4 exams done, and now I've got to go through the last bureaucratic hurdles that the state accountancy board throws in my way. So the goal is hopefully, I don't want to knock on wood, but like hopefully within the next 3 or 4 months, I'll actually have the certificate hanging on my wall.
That's great. Cool. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, Josh, we promised the listeners that we would offer an event so it's 2 weeks out from the Magic 30 celebration in Las Vegas that we're going to be attending. If any of our listeners are going to be there, we wanted to offer you an opportunity to meet up with us. So how's it going to work?
So Magic 30 has a really rigid tournament schedule. This is unusual for events, but this is the first one that Wizards of the Coast is actually like hosting and producing. So we're just all going to have to adjust. What we've determined is based on the events that you want to do and based on the events that I want to do, we have a gap. There is a chunk of time that we have available together Saturday at 2 p.m. So this is going to be Saturday, October 29th, 2 p.m. at Magic 30. We don't have a location yet. We'll probably have to blast that out.
So what I anticipate is we'll just kind of find some tables in the corners where there's usually just people like, I don't know, writing down their deck lists or just playing some scrappy games, and we'll both be wearing Magic.
Oh, dang it! You spoiled it. Like I was going to say, like you'll be able to identify us. Don't worry, you'll see it. But go ahead and finish it off since.
Okay, so we'll both be wearing themed Bad at Magic jerseys that are in the colors of the podcast, the green, gray, and black, and you'll be able to find us by looking for the Bad at Magic logo.
Hopefully, it won't be so super crowded, or the venue won't be so tight that it will be impossible to find somebody in a crowd. But I imagine we can probably throw something up on the Facebook while we're there if we really need to define a location to help people find us.
Yeah. Probably the subreddit, I think, is what I'm going to use to keep in touch with people.
This really feels like something we should be doing on Twitter.
Yeah, subreddit works too.
It was funny. That silence was both of us contemplating and neither of us wanting to get Twitter to facilitate this event.
We reserved the Bad at Magic Twitter account a while back, and I've just never been tempted to mess with it. I'm not interested in keeping people that up to date on anything we're doing.
This is the problem when you listen to a podcast hosted by two middle-aged guys. Is we just don't want to learn new platforms.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of... and we'll get together. If you come and we're having a good time, we might invite you to join us for dinner later on.
Yes. I reserve the right to refuse an invitation to anyone that's there. So if 8 people come and I only invite 3, just know that's because you didn't make the cut.
All right. Well, speaking of Magic's 30th anniversary, Josh, the Wizards of the Coast announced a new product this week in celebration of the 30th anniversary that's been very controversial. Now, I don't want to lose our mothers here, so let's talk about this in a way that people outside the community can understand.
We do have to give a general explanation of what it is.
Yes.
So,
obviously, this is the largest and most commercially successful trading card game of all time. So the fact that it has lived for 30 years is a big deal all by itself, but it is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And the first set that came out in 1992 was called Alpha, and it was a limited run, and it sold out like crazy. And so they had to reprint all of it in beta. It's beta, right?
Yeah, they changed the shape of the card a little bit and fixed a couple of errors and then reprinted it, but it was still a limited print run.
Right. It was much larger than Alpha, but it was still limited. And so what they decided to do for Magic's 30th birthday is they reprinted Beta, and you can buy it straight from the manufacturer, Ben. That's so cool.
Sorta.
It's such a throwback product. Who wouldn't want to go back and get some Beta packs with like the new style of the cards?
So a few years ago they did this, I don't know, it was like the 20th anniversary or something, and they printed it a collector's edition. It cost $49.95, and it was the complete set of Beta in gold-bordered cards. So it was obvious looking at it that it wasn't playable cards. They were just like collector's edition, but you got all of the cards in the set plus 60 lands for $50.
Yes, so you got one copy of each card, but like you said, because of the gold border, they were not tournament legal. You couldn't put it in your deck and play with these cards.
But it was a way to open them and get the excitement and see them yourself of the original versions of the cards.
Not tournament legal, one copy of every card guaranteed, $50.
Right.
But what they did with this one is they decided, we're going to put them into packs, just like cards are sold now. So you have 4 packs that are 15 random cards. So you can get duplicates. You're not guaranteed to get a copy of every card in the set unless you buy tons of this product. And here's the real kick to the knackers, the real just rubbing our noses in it, is that product, those 4 packs of 15 cards, 60 random cards, is selling for $1,000.
$1,000. That's $17 per card, non-tournament playable.
That's the thing, is these are fancy collectors' proxies. Like, you can't use them for anything.
That's 60 times more expensive than a regular booster pack. And they're not tournament playable.
You can't even sit down at a casual game of like Commander and play with these cards in your deck unless you get the okay of your opponents. Hey, are you guys
we need to talk about the reserve list, Josh. So in a collectible trading card game economy, the problem is that there's a secondary market. And as soon as Magic the Gathering had been around long enough that cards, because of their playability or their collectability, had started to increase in value. And then Wizards of the Coast chose to do what's called a reprint, where they basically print the card again in a future set. It would reduce the utility of the previously collected cards. And collectors felt betrayed when Wizards of the Coast did this. And there was a list of, I don't know how many, 100? 200?
It's a couple of hundred cards, yeah.
200 very valuable cards from early on in the game that had risen up so much in price that collectors were worried that if Wizards ever printed any of these cards again, it would ruin the trust between them, the producers of the game, and the collectors of the game. And so Wizards signed and released a public statement promising to never again reprint in a tournament playable form these 200 cards.
There was also some concerns about speculation. Like, because if some insider at Wizards knew that this card, like these valuable cards, were going to get reprinted or whatever, they could go and speculate. They could buy a bunch and then sell them for a quick profit. And then when the reprints came out, they would tank the value of it. Just all that insider trading kind of stuff came up to think. And this promise they made years and years and years and years ago. And honestly, I'm astounded that they're still standing by it to this day.
Yeah.
Because from my understanding, it's not a legal agreement. It's just Wizards pinky promising a secondary market that they have no stake in, that they won't do something that would be profitable for them as a company.
Yeah, it's interesting to just consider what the monetary and reputational value of that promise is.
Well, and the whole point of the reserve list when it comes to this product is that they said they would never reprint those cards in a playable fashion. But they have reprinted a bunch of reserve list cards in this product.
Collectors,
in this
non-playable format.
They're not tournament legal, so technically we can reprint them and it's not breaking our promise. And there's so many things wrong with this whole setup where they're selling 60 cards for $1,000. First of all, who's this for, Ben? Like,
it's not for me.
It's not for anybody. That's the thing. Like, if you're the kind of person that's willing to spend $1,000 on Magic cards, you're gonna buy real tournament legal Magic cards, and it's easy to spend $1,000 when you start talking about.
So there's a whole
product.
sub community of investors and speculators, collectors, or even whales. I don't know, people like Post Malone that just love Magic the Gathering and have money to burn and might buy this kind of thing.
Here's the other thing.
Brandon Sanderson.
Brandon Sanderson's going to buy a bunch. The other interesting part about this is like, oh, this is for you. We're doing this for our community, but you can't really buy it. Like, they are sending only one copy of it. They're sending one box of 4 boosters to a game store, to any game store on the planet. And then that's all that they're shipping out. The rest has to be bought directly from them, the manufacturer.
And it's a limited print run. They're not printing it to demand. So
it's guaranteed to sell out.
Yeah, it'll sell out, and it's not. So, okay, here are my 3 criticisms of it. 1, it violates the spirit of the reserve list. If that's a thing, I don't really care about it. You don't either. I don't know who or what that's for. 2, it's not for the people. It's for whales, collectors, investors, not the players. And 3, it's not really a 30th anniversary celebration.
No, not at all. It's like, oh, hey, everybody, it's my 30th birthday. I want everyone to come, and I'm charging $1,000 cover for it.
Or, hey, yeah, exactly. I'm charging $1,000 a cover. Or, and there's only 20 slots available.
But I want all my friends to be there. But if you're not rich, then I guess you're not my friend.
So, is this what everyone's saying, Josh? Is it just a shameless cash grab?
This has been everything that I've seen is everybody talking about how, 1, yes, they are going to make all the money in the world. Like, money is just going to rain down on them from the sky. But 2, that the entire normal community, I'm doing air quotes, the normal players are all up in arms about this. Like, hey, Wizards, this is making us lose faith in you as a company that cares about its customers.
Yeah, it almost feels like this damage of doing something this tone deaf and out of touch is equal to the amount of damage that could be done by violating the reserve list. Like, which makes you more mad?
Honestly, I would have been way happier if they reprinted stuff off the reserve list, because I'm not one of the, how many people in the world, like what fraction of their base actually has a significant amount of money invested in the reserve list.
It's minuscule. So they must be thinking, I don't know, I can't put thoughts in their head, but they must believe that the reputational damage they would take by violating the reserve list is somehow greater than whatever, violation there would be to that small portion of people that actually possess cards on the reserve list.
Yeah. And the other part of this that we haven't talked about yet is the whole corporate side of things, because the owner of this game, Wizards of the Coast, is a subsidiary of Hasbro, Inc. And Hasbro set a goal for Wizards a couple of years back saying that they needed to double their revenue within a calendar year, and they did it. And now Hasbro has come out and said that, Wizards of the Coast is going to increase their revenue by another 50% over the next 3 years. And it turns out, looking at all of the financial statements and things, that Wizards of the Coast is really propping up Hasbro as a company. Like, Hasbro would probably have gone under with the pandemic if it hadn't been for Wizards of the Coast injecting capital into that company. So how much of this is Wizards of the Coast and how much of this is Hasbro just hitting the money piñata? Like, hey, I know that you're a company that has cared about your player base and made really smart decisions to encourage people to join your community, but now is time. We are going to exploit all of these people, and we're going to actually make money off of this goodwill that you've been building up over the last 30 years.
Maybe. This isn't a new idea. It predates almost humanity. The fable of killing the golden goose the goose that lays the golden eggs to get to the eggs faster is an old idea.
That's a thing? Did you read the same Jack and the Beanstalk story that I did? Because
no, that's not the one. I think it's one of Grimm's fables. It's basically the idea that there was a man that had a goose that would lay golden eggs, and he had to pay bills or whatever, and it wasn't laying them fast enough, so he killed it and opened it up, and of course there was nothing inside, and now his golden goose is dead.
I'll tell you what, people, if you haven't read the actual old school Grimm's fairy tales, they are not for your kids. Like, do not sit a 5-year-old down at bedtime and open a Grimm's fairy tale.
So the question I have for you, Josh, is, between the two of us, we probably put down $1,000 to go to this party in Vegas that's all going to Wizards of the Coast.
That's true. They really upped the bar as far as
the cost of getting in the door.
The barrier to entry for this event is higher than it's ever been.
Yep. And I don't know what the reasoning for that is. I can't attribute that to them. But did we do it too easily? Are we just... I don't know.
Well, they had super special high tier weekend passes to this thing that were upwards of $700, $800, $900, and they sold out almost instantly. So either the community and the fan base is just foaming at the mouth to get back to paper events after COVID, or Wizards just realizes that there is a lot more people at the high end of the income bracket that they need to start exploiting. I mean, this game is 30 years old. If you pick this game up as a kid in middle or high school, back when it came out in the 1990s, you're now late into your professional career. Maybe they're just realizing that their player base is got a ton of disposable income and they need to up the prices on everything.
Maybe. Okay, but then let's go back to the episode 82 concept that we introduced. I'm not remembering off the top of my head. Hanlon's razor.
Ignorance over malice.
Right. Never. And maybe they're not, sitting in a smoke-filled room, rubbing their tapping their fingertips together like Monty Burns from The Simpsons. Yes.
All right. So the ignorance versus malice argument to this, in my mind, is Hasbro sending down a marketing or some kind of one of those math guys that lives in a corporate office somewhere that does all the economic analysis of populations and customer bases and that kind of thing. The guys that you hear market analysis stuff from on the news, right?
Yeah.
And he came into Wizards of the Coast like, okay, where's your market analysis? And Wizards of the Coast goes, oh, we don't have one. We just sell packs for $5 a piece. And then it was the Hasbro guy that then started actually doing the calculations and the math and realizing, hey, guys, we need to dial this up to 5 times what you have set it at already.
Maybe you're right.
Well, this has been going on for years now because they've been introducing a slew of brand new products since I got out. I got out probably 2008, 2009.
There's
and I came
Secret
back
Lair. There's all the Commander releases. They're going to,
There's so much new stuff that didn't exist when I was still playing. I remember going to the store and I want to buy some packs. I'm getting back into it. And there was 8 different kinds of packs that I could buy, and I didn't know what to get.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the problem. They tried to solve this problem during the holiday season. Like, what if you're some mom that knows your son likes Magic the Gathering, you want to buy him something for Christmas, what do you get? And they go to the game store and see 8 different kinds of packs, and they don't know what to get. Hint to anyone that wants to buy me gifts, since I love disc golf, you can't go wrong with disc golf. Like, buy a disc.
Are you seriously plugging Christmas gifts that you want on the podcast?
The point I'm trying to make is that it's a lot easier for something like that to just fumble into it and get it right. But with Magic the Gathering, you're almost guaranteed to get it wrong.
It sounds like you don't realize that Wizards of the Coast puts out a gift pack for Magic the Gathering.
Josh, they haven't done that in like a decade.
Oh, have they not?
No.
Oh, that's my bad. Never mind then.
Yeah.
Disregard.
It probably wasn't working. Nobody actually wanted it. It's hard for them to put together. Yeah.
I guess since Ben brought this genie out of the bottle, I want to jump on this bandwagon too.
Go for it.
Anybody that wants to get me a gift for Christmas, I accept Amazon gift cards. So thank you for that.
There you go. Something more fungible.
Yes. Ben, I'm a middle-aged man with decent income. I buy whatever I want for myself anyway.
Yeah, that's my wife's problem with me.
Oh, you know what? How about that? Yeah, buy me like 10,000 gems on Magic Gathering Arena. Do that.
For Bad at Logic today, since it's an odd episode, let's look at a bias.
You love just taking the parts where I'm supposed to talk and then talking anyway.
Well, then you introduce Bad at English.
I'm going to do that. I'm taking you up on that.
Okay.
All right, so today we are going to do the Barnum Effect. This is from the Your Bias Is cards. We are running out of these. So listeners, if you have suggestions to replace the segment, please let us know.
I've got a good one in the wings. I'll tell you about it later.
Ooh, excellent. So the Barnum Effect is you see personal specifics in vague statements by filling in the gaps. Oh, Ben. I fear and I'm worried that you have built your whole life on this bias.
The Barnum Effect. You see personal specifics in vague statements by filling in the gaps. Go ahead.
Wow, you know what? I don't think I've ever actually hauled 2 of my sons up to the top of a hill to sacrifice one in the name of God, but I can totally apply this to like 6 different things that happened this week.
Yeah, so the Bible's a good example. I want to defend it other than say that I'm victim to the bias, but then what do you think it is? If you don't have personal specifics, they don't exist?
That's not true. So I'm being disingenuous by doing because that's a parable. Like that's the intent of that story is for you to fill in the blanks and then take the moral value at the end of it and apply it in circumstances other than what is described.
Sure. So
I think
one of the examples they give here is like a psychic or an astrologer who kind of knows that their discipline is bunk.
Yes.
And they're counting on you doing this.
Yeah. If you haven't seen, or like there was years ago, there was cold reading. There's a couple of different TV shows where they did this. There were guys that got really good about making super vague statements like this, but then they were always doing it to like distraught people that had just lost a loved one. And they were super over eager to like pour their own personal experiences into these vague statements to make it seem like they were clairvoyant.
Do like a seance or a...
Yeah, exactly. South Park did a wonderful breakdown of that, as they typically do when it becomes a ridiculous meme. I think that
as crass and tasteless as South Park can be sometimes, I think at the core they are doing this. They're taking critical thinking and applying it to things that don't have a lot of where critical thinking is in short supply.
So, listeners, unfortunately, the Barnum Effect applies to all of these psychic astrology things. If you are a person that wakes up and the first thing you do is you check to see if Mars is aligned with Jupiter to see how it's going to impact the Capricorns for the day, I'm sorry to tell you this, none of that has any bearing on your life whatsoever.
Josh, I'd like to think that listeners of the Bad at Magic podcast and people who get up and read their horoscope is a null set.
These are non-overlapping segments of the population.
One of the values of this podcast is critical thinking.
You heard it right here, folks. Ben says if you read your horoscope and you think it's real, stop listening. We don't want you as listeners.
No, I'm saying that is not what I said. I said there are no listeners to this podcast that read their horoscope.
You can't use absolutes like that, though, because like only Siths use absolutes, for one thing. And second, like what if there is a listener that believes in critical thinking but also believes in their horoscope? Ben, you know what? I'm done talking about this, so forget it. Screw the Barnum Effect. Moving on. for Bad at English today, I thought we would reach real deep into the bag of English stuff, and I want you to talk about the sticky wicket.
Okay, so have you heard sticky wicket before?
No, that's the first time I've read it.
Yeah.
I haven't even read the notes for this show yet.
I found a theme when we talk about these sometimes, and that's when there are ones that have arisen since the time that the United States, since the colonies rebelled against the crown. And this is one that it relates to the sport of cricket. So a wicket in cricket means two things. One, it means the three little stakes that stick up and have stumps across the top that the bowler's throwing the ball at. And two, since there's two sets of those in a pair, all of the ground in between them is referred to generally as the wicket. And when a bowler bowls the ball towards the wicket at the other end of the wicket, and the batsman's trying to defend the wicket with his bat, if it is rained or the ground is slick, they refer to that as a sticky wicket. And it's a problem for the batter because it makes the ball unpredictable and more likely to hit the wicket. So being in a sticky wicket means a difficult circumstance. Just like in America, we might say, oh, he hit a home run, or that's way out in left field. To the British, saying in a sticky wicket is a very common sports metaphor that even people who don't play that sport would use to mean problematic, difficult circumstance.
Okay, so I get a couple things from this. They play cricket in all weather. So, like, if a hurricane rolls in, like fog as thick as peanut butter, like they're going to play cricket?
No, but they never play it indoors. It's always outdoors. So even if it had rained recently and now the ground between the wickets is muddy.
Okay, so it's not raining while they're throwing
I don't
balls.
actually know. Like, I don't think they do like baseball where if it starts raining, they call it off.
Okay, if it starts raining, they might just play through.
Yeah.
Because they're British and we're going to keep a stiff upper lip.
Well, we'll talk about the weaknesses of cricket later, which is why I chose sticky wicket today. But for now, we'll just say that probably in the early 1930s was the first time this saw publication as a phrase meaning a difficult circumstance. They use it as commonly as we do baseball metaphors in America.
So, also, British people, please stop using the same word for two things that are related in the same context. Like, you can't, like, throw a ball down a wicket at a wicket, hoping to stop the batter from defending the wicket on the wicket with the other wicket behind you. Like, that's not helpful for anyone.
Yeah, I'm with you. There should be a separate word that means it, but I'm sure that this is a double standard and we do it too. I just can't think of an example off the top of my head.
This is like in baseball if we called balls and strikes just balls. Like, it's just balls. Oh, he's got 2 balls and three balls. Like, that is a full count. Like, that's the kind of equivalent thing we're looking at here.
Yeah, that's a straw man, but I bet that we do this where we reuse the same word unnecessarily.
Okay.
We need to take a second to talk. I'll call it board game survival, but really yesterday there was a in-person Magic event that at my local game store that was in the constructed modern format, which means you bring your own deck that you already built in advance. And I went undefeated, got first place, and I am the store champion. This is my prize.
Ooh, that's pretty. It's all right. So listeners don't care about this, but it's a foil promo textless Omnath Locus of Creation.
Yeah, and it's a very powerful card that sees common play both in Modern and in Commander because it's 4 colors.
Well, what's really funny about this, I remember people complaining about this promo on the internet when they announced it, because usually when they do textless promos, which means there's no text on the card, it's just the picture of the
and you're
thing
supposed to have memorized everything that's on it and know it.
And usually they do it for very simple cards like Lightning Bolt. Everybody knows Lightning Bolt. It's an instant. It does 3 damage to anything.
Right.
But Omnath has more words on it, I think, than half of any other card in Magic.
Yeah, it has like 8 lines of text.
I could rattle them off right now, but I have a good memory, and you are notorious for not knowing any of this stuff. So
no. Okay, hang on. I want to point out that was a poor overgeneralization. I remember what cards do. I don't remember the proper nouns.
Oh, okay, Ben. So tell me exactly what it is that Omnath Locus of Creation does without looking it up.
All right, Omnath Locus of Creation is a 4/4 legendary. I don't remember his creature type.
Oh, elemental.
Elemental creature. He has landfall, and the landfall triggers 3 times. The first time, I think it gains 4 life and draws a card. The second time, it gives you 4 mana. And I don't remember what it does the third time.
Okay, that's a good try. I'm also going to do it off the top of my head, and then we're going to check and see who's right. First of all, it has an enter the battlefield trigger. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Second, you're right, it does have landfall. If it's the first time this ability has resolved this turn, you gain 4 life.
So it enters the battlefield and then landfall.
If it's the second time this ability is resolved, you get white, blue, red, and green. You get 4 mana added to your pool. And if it's the third time this is resolved, you deal 4 damage to any target.
Okay.
I think that's what it says. Now we have to look it up. I'm going to do it right.
So in this tournament, I played a red-green deck I call Karnza, which is a play on the common deck archetype called Ponza, which is mainly designed around accelerating out an early disruptive or threatening card, and it's just versatile enough that I was able to take on all comers yesterday.
Okay, I was closer because obviously, but you missed the enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Landfall, if it's the first time, you get 4 life. Second time, you get red, green, white, blue. I don't know why that's the order of the mana. It is 4 mana and is the colors that I said. If it's the third time, it deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control.
Yeah. Okay. Jeez.
So anyway, what we're talking about here is there is like 12 lines of text on this card that you're supposed to have memorized on this promo that has no text on it.
Anyway, because it's a foil textless promo that's in limited supply, it's very valuable. Does the site you looked it up there on show its value?
I already closed the window.
Okay, I looked it up. It's $175. And that's how much I won in prize money and store credit for my victory. And the card itself is worth $175. So, yeah, not bad.
I'm showing on the site that I'm looking at, it's showing about $140, $138.
Okay. Well, I guess there were a bunch of store championships yesterday, flooded the market, reduced the price a little bit.
Also, I want to point out that you called this segment bad or board game survivor when really this should be Ben gets a little less bad at Magic.
Yeah.
Congratulations, buddy. Good job winning the tournament.
So I want to talk about this. Mom, hang in there. I want to talk about what I decided to do, because there was a time where I was still trying to find my legs in Magic, like what I was going to do in constructive formats. When I get to build a deck and bring it with me, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to do something exciting? Am I trying to have fun? Am I trying to express myself? Do I want to win? The player archetypes. And I noticed there was something I envied about people who were able to be successful, and that was pick a good deck and learn it really well. Because sometimes there's this tendency to want to try to shift decks all the time based on the metagame. Metagame means like all the other decks that other players are playing. That when things happen in the environment and things swirl around and things shift and change, if you can always be on the cutting edge of playing the thing that beats the thing that everyone else is trying to do, then you can win. But it's almost a fool's errand to try to constantly figure out what that is. And there's something to be said for building a really solid deck, and then even though you're not shifting all the time, just learning how it works so well that you can overcome the margins of not playing the best deck by being really good at your deck.
Okay. I love all the bias talk that you're putting into this, because that is the strategy, obviously, that you've adopted, because you've been playing this deck nonstop for at least 5 years, right?
I can argue either bias. I'm just saying that I felt like I was able to do that yesterday, that I played a deck I've been playing for a long time. I'm really good at it, and I was able to win.
Well, congratulations. And that puts you firmly into that spike archetype. You're in it to win. You're going to maximize your ability to try to win games. And so it's always good to see you on the front page of a game store's Facebook site saying, this is our store champion for the evening. That's good stuff, Ben. Congratulations.
All right, Josh, let's talk about some bad at technology.
All right, so the only note that I put in here to remind me of this story is inkjet printers can kiss my butt.
That's not what you said.
That is absolutely not what I wrote down, but I don't want to get us demonetized.
Okay.
So Ben, forever ago, years and years ago, when I was in college, as a matter of fact, I had a laser printer, like a black and white laser printer. And
how did you get those? Those cost like $600 back in the day.
My parents really loved me for going to a all expenses paid college. So They bought me
I see.
a monitor and a printer and like just yeah.
You saved them a lot of money by getting a full scholarship, so they had a little bit of money to give you a gift.
That's how I'm interpreting it. I could also interpret that they just loved me very much, so we can go with that.
Okay.
So I had a laser printer, and I put so many pages through that thing without replacing the toner. Like, it was great. Loved it.
Yeah, but that was back in the day when laser printers were monochrome.
Yeah, this was black and white only. It was very heavy. This is the early 2000s.
Yeah,
so
bulky.
very large. Yeah. All of these things, right? So it wasn't until like many years later, it wasn't until I went to Clovis, New Mexico, that I had to actually look into buying a new printer because this one was no longer cutting the mustard. And I got another laser printer. I bought a color laser printer this time.
Wait. What year did you go to Clovis?
I went to Clovis in 2010-ish, somewhere.
So you had the same printer for 10 years?
Yes.
Wow.
And it worked that entire time, and it was wonderful, and I had no complaints.
Okay, go on.
Well, it came down to the printer I had that I had had for 10 years was running out of ink, and the cartridge was going to be like $300. And so I was like, I should probably just get a new one. This one's up there in age, and I should get a color. So I got a color laser printer, okay? And that served its purpose exactly like the other one did. Did everything that I needed it to do.
Okay, so there was definitely Moore's Law going on here, or just kind of tech commoditization, where basically things that were expensive in the early days just became more ubiquitous and easier to produce and cheaper. So were you able to get a color laser printer for about the price of your monochrome laser printer a decade before?
Cheaper.
Wow.
It was a little cheaper, it was a little smaller, and it was color. Everything was more compact. Like it was just better,
right? It's a Festivus miracle.
It was 10 years newer. Of course it was.
Awesome.
Well, then something happened where the color laser printer goes through color. Like, I think this is just all printers. They go through the colors super fast. And then the color cartridges are smaller than the black cartridges because they're not going to use them as much. And it was doing that stupid thing where, like, if I forgot to switch it to grayscale, then it would print out all funky because it was out of cyan, but it had plenty of red, so everything looks pink. Just all the problems. And I don't know what happened, but eventually we just switched. We're like, oh, we need
Wait, did you just say cayenne?
Cayenne? Yeah. Is it not cayenne?
It's cyan.
Whatever. It's my podcast. I'll say what I want. They're just words. They don't control me, Ben.
My brain was trying to figure out what color that was. Is that the red one? No, that's magenta.
Can I continue?
Yes.
All right, I don't remember what happened, but we stopped using the printer. We stopped printing stuff at home, and it got to the point where we needed to print something. I don't know if it was color or not or whatever happened, but we ended up buying one of those dirt cheap 3-in-1 like flatbed scanner inkjet printer things.
Yes.
Okay, so we just had that. And then when I moved everything into the house for the pandemic, that's the printer that got moved inside. It got put on a shelf. It was hooked up to the wireless network, and that's just been the printer.
$49.95 at Best Buy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And the problem is that thing, the ink doesn't last. You print like 5 things and you need to get a new cartridge.
Well, yeah, the one it comes with is almost like, it's like a starter set. It barely has any ink whatsoever in it. This is notorious.
This is notorious that the replacement ink cartridges are more expensive than the printer, the entire printer itself. And that's why they sell them for so cheap, is they don't want to sell you a printer, they want to sell you ink cartridges.
Slight correction to what you just said. I think the actual printer itself, they're actually taking a loss on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Because the cartridges are so...
It's just the economics. It's the business model now of this. They're selling you the printer at a loss, hoping to make back the money on... It's the same with like a PlayStation 5. You know, they're selling you a $1,000 computer for $400 and then licensing the games.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, anyway, Ben, you know how I am when I feel like the man's trying to stick it to me. I want to stick it right back to the man. And so I refuse to buy the manufacturer name brand approved ink cartridges.
Okay, there's a significant percentage of people like you out there who reject this business model. Like, you think you can cheat it?
We can go on Amazon and you can get a Chinese knockoff of that says right on the thing it fits into this printer for half the price. It's like, why wouldn't I buy that? I'll tell you why you shouldn't buy that, Ben. Because you buy that and you stick it in your inkjet printer, and now every document that you print looks like a barcode. Where there's a stripe of it that looks right, and then there's a stripe of it that's really, really light colored, and then another stripe that looks right, and there's like 100 stripes up the page that you just printed.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I just buy the manufacturer printer cartridges. You're welcome.
Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, so I was so pissed off at it yesterday because we had to print. We went to a concert and we had to print our tickets out, and the tickets had a barcode on them, and my printer is already printing barcodes. And so it was printing this indecipherable hieroglyphic thing that was supposed to be a barcode.
Yeah, we're so close to figuring all this out.
I was so frustrated. We probably just could have brought them on our phone. But
right, that's what I was going to say.
But I was just frustrated at the times. Like, you know what? We've got that other printer sitting out there that hasn't been plugged in for upwards of 5 years now. Let's see if that still works. And so, yeah, I plugged it in, and I went and downloaded
the color laser printer.
The color laser printer. I had to download the drivers from a different manufacturer's website. Apparently, the manufacturer that made the printer is no longer making this printer and was sold to another manufacturer. Whatever, it doesn't matter. They still had the software because companies are good about that. Downloaded it, hooked it up to the wireless network, and it spit out a perfect page on it's 5 to 7 year old ink, like just black ink cartridge now. First try, no problems.
That is kind of embarrassing. Like, get your act together, inkjet technology.
Well, here's what I have decided is, I'm not inkjet printers can just kiss my butt. Like, I'm done. I'm getting out of that whole hamster wheel race. So if I've got to pay extra to get a manufacturer approved laser
you'll say
jet
that
cartridge,
until you need to buy new cartridges for your color laser printer.
My wife did. She got a black one, not any color. We've given up. We've given up on color. We're just not going to print color. This is not going to be a thing. We're just going to print black and white documents. She bought a new black toner cartridge for it.
Your kids are going to get older and you won't be able to get away with that. But go on.
What are my kids going to have to print, Ben? The school sends them home with computers now for crying
I don't
out
know.
loud.
There's kind of a transformation happening at the same time where everything is slowly but surely becoming more and more digital. Like, I felt hopeless at one point, like the schools were just going to continue to print reams upon reams of paper worksheets that were copies of dittos from 40 years ago. But I think we are actually starting to make the transition. Maybe your kids won't need to print something out. But right now, my kids still do the things where they have to get a piece of poster board and print out photos of themselves from when they were a baby and cut them out and glue them to the poster board.
My daughter did have to do Star Student, and we had to get pictures printed at the Walgreens because that's where you get 4x6s made.
Right.
But at the same time, my son who's in 5th grade...
So you outsource it so you don't have to own it.
Well, that one, yeah, for the pictures, yeah. My son, who's in the 5th grade, his last major presentation that he had to give was all made in Google Slides. Like, he had to give a PowerPoint presentation. Like, that's just how it's going to be in the future.
Yeah.
So anyway, listeners, if you have an inkjet printer, just give up on it. That thing's a piece of crap. I'm sure you hate it just as much as I do.
All right, I'm not here to defend the inkjet business model versus a laser business model. I think they both have a role in the economy.
You're that guy that still subscribes to HP Instant Ink, and they'll send you cartridges in the mail, don't you?
I've told you about my history, haven't I? I used to run the printer aisle at Best Buy back in 1998. I was employee of the month.
I don't know why. I don't know why I am surprised by the jobs that you have held. Like, I knew that you sold computers at Sears when computers were still like green on black backgrounds.
Yeah.
I did not know that you ran the printer aisle at Best Buy. When was this? When was this between teaching and trimming palm trees in Las Vegas? Like, just in your spare time?
Okay, to tell you how brief of a time this is while I was dating my wife.
That was all of 4 months.
But I'll give you one quick anecdote from that time. So during that time, I ran the printer aisle, and I was good at it. You know, I learned to tell. Basically, a customer would come up to me, and they would say, "Why should I buy a laser printer versus an inkjet printer versus a dot matrix printer, or whatever? What are the differences? Why should I choose one or the other?" And I had to understand the technologies well enough to describe to them. And some of the benefits are in the quality of the output, and some of the benefits are in the economic model. And I could articulate both of those. One skill I uncannily got during that time was that I learned the sounds that each printer made. So Canon and Epson and Hewlett-Packard all have a very distinctive sound. Not only that, but different models have a different sound. And I learned that I could tell them to the point that when 2 years later I went and got a job working for Microsoft doing tech support for Microsoft Word, when a customer would call me up and say, "I'm having problems printing," I could hear over the phone the sound of their printer and know the model number by the sound that it was making over the phone. And I would test it out every now and then. I would be like, "Is that a Hewlett-Packard Inkjet 478C?" And they would go, It is. Can you see me?
Oh, it's
of
not
course
that.
We can. We're Microsoft.
It's not that impressive. I'm actually in your house. You're just. Oh, God, you're a sitcom character. You're not a real person. You're some made up figment of my imagination that somehow gets on the other end of a Skype call every week. Because if I called IT and the guy was able to name the model of the printer, I'd hang up. I would think I was talking to a ghost.
Yeah, it was just a parlor trick. What a worthless skill to have. My dad could build a house from a bare ground to shingles on wired up. I can tell you what kind of model number of printer you have over the phone.
I think those skills are equally they generate equal amounts of utility just for different audiences. Because you could tell that the story that you just told, my dad could build a house from the ground up, and I can tell the model number of a printer from the sound it makes. If you told that to an IT tech conference, one of them, they would just look at you and shrug. The other one would get you a free beer.
Until civilization falls apart, and then my dad's useful and I'm worthless. I can get your inkjet printer working.
That's a good skill to have.
All right, Josh, you sent me something this week that I think is worthy of a main segment of this podcast.
I love how you take random 10-second TikToks. I'm like, hey, this is curious. And you're like, that's amazing. We must talk about this for an hour.
Yeah, so that's what it was. You sent me a random 10-second TikTok for the Savannah Bananas.
Which is an excellent name to have as a team.
Yeah, but before we get to talk about that, I want to start off by talking about Magic the Gathering. So this past week, Wizards of the Coast announced what are frequently called bannings, which basically say in our defined constructed formats, the card pool that's available for players to use to build their decks, we are no longer going to allow a card that we printed and put into that environment.
Hey, we've been watching you all play Magic because we run the servers that this game is played on, and we notice that a lot of people aren't having fun because most people are playing this card, and it's probably better than we thought it was when we made it, so we're going to get rid of it.
Yeah. Now, there's a risk to them doing that. Talk about the risk. What's the problem with them doing that?
Well, the risk is Ben Rich, some random person might print an overpowered card. Let's call it Oko Thief of Crowns. And then somebody recognizing the value that this card gives you in a game might go out and spend, huge dollars, money out of his pocket to buy a playset of said card, only to then have Wizards announce that this is no longer tournament playable. And then the value of that card tanks. So, Ben, how much did you pay for your playset of Oko Thief?
Yeah, I paid $35 a piece for them. Let me see how much they're going for now.
Yeah, so you paid $140 for 4 cards.
I didn't. I think I only own 3. Right now, they're going for $10 each. So they lost 70% of their value. But one of the ones in question here is the Meat Hook Masker, which is a gross-sounding card. It was so ubiquitous in the format that it was going for $100 a piece. Ugh. It is now $33. So again, it lost 70% of its value after the announcement of the banning. And this is the risk. All the players out there that owned one of these that bought them at that high marginal utility value of $100, now it's gone down to 33 and they lost 70% of that value.
Here's the other risk is you have a brand new player that heard about we have tournaments on the weekends at the game store. You should come back in with your deck and play. Oh, great. And they learn to play and they make this deck and they're very proud of it and they sit down to play and they play one of these cards that they open from a pack. And then somebody across the table is like, you didn't go onto the manufacturer's website and check the most recent banning and restriction announcement because you just broke the tournament rules and now we're going to kick you out. That puts a ridiculous sour taste in the mouth of any new player.
Okay, so that's the risk. But the risk of not doing it is a risk of it being one of the most played cards in the format, suppressing other archetypes and strategies and making it no fun for everyone. Both the people playing it that kind of play it out of feeling of obligation because it's the best card and they have to, or the people trying to play against it but unsuccessfully because it's so overpowered.
As an example, for me personally, there was a set that came out recently, New Capenna, that I didn't like the draft environment. I just couldn't get my head around it, and I wasn't enjoying it, so I stopped playing it. I stopped giving Wizards my money until it rotated to a new set, and there's 2 months where they lost revenue because I just didn't like what it was.
So the underlying thing that's happening here that I want to focus on is that they produce a game that lots of people play, that has a proud history and competitive formats and lots of players. And as long as everyone's enjoying it, they'll keep coming and it'll keep growing and they'll keep getting money. If something happens that starts to suppress that, they have a few buttons and dials on their console they can use. One of them is to ban a card in one of their competitive play formats. Another button and dial they might have is to change the rules. A few years ago, they changed what's called the mulligan rule, which basically is when you get your opening hand, if it's unplayable or not beneficial to the current match you're in, there's something you can do at a slight cost that allows you to get another random hand before you begin playing the game.
Yes, and I remember they went through a couple different iterations of the beginning of the game mulligan rule. Because the cards that you start with are so important, it's a huge disadvantage to immediately just have to pitch one. And so they retooled it to make it feels a lot better now. The London mulligan, which is what they've settled on, it feels a lot better as a player, and it feels more fair.
Yes, I've never missed the old mulligan rules once London mulligan came into place. Because it definitely is still a cost, but there are less non-games where you just like keep 5 cards because it's the best you're going to get and you just never play anything and you're out of the game.
They did another change a few years before that where they made a change where damage used to stack. And so like it made sense to veteran players, but it could lead to some play states that didn't make a lot of sense to new players where it's like,
and it kind of limited design space.
It did. There was some problems. There were some things that they couldn't do with certain abilities because damage could stack, which would then make this ability way better than it should be. And so that's something I identified, I think, correctly that makes the game better.
So if you want to have a collectible trading card game, you want to have players playing it and having it fun, you as the manufacturer and the arbiter of the competitive environments can change the rules, you can change the card sets, and those are your buttons and dials. If you didn't like any of that, you could go play another game where they set it up. It has completely different structure and rules and game and all of that stuff so that it can scratch whatever your itch is that you're trying to scratch with the trading card game. So all that being laid out as the groundwork, let's put aside that kind of games because this is a podcast about games, life, and other things, and let's talk about sport.
Ah, yes. We're talking about sports with an S, plural. Yeah, you British old country person.
And they do the opposite with math.
All right, so in reference to what started this whole conversation is I sent you a 10-second TikTok about the Savannah Bananas. Uh-huh. And what was interesting is this TikTok was about the changes and the rules changes that they made to the game of baseball with the specific intention of making it more viewer friendly, making it more fun for the fans to watch baseball.
It's almost like they got a room full of guys drinking beer to sit around and be like, what do we hate about baseball? And they listed them all out on a whiteboard, and then they came up with their own version of baseball that changed every single one of them.
And I gotta tell you, Ben, like, I've watched that TikTok a couple times. I've read these rules through a couple times. I really like it. I think they did a good job.
Do you remember what my take on it was?
I don't.
It's a little bit gimmicky to the point where it feels like it's not going to have staying power.
And honestly, it probably won't. But that's not because that this is uninteresting or not worthy of that. But it's because I think the actual Major League Baseball league just has way too much money and momentum.
Okay. But before we get into what their proposed changes actually were, and listeners, before we come back to this, I want you to be thinking about if I was going to change the game of American baseball, what would I change to make it better? You're probably right. But before we do that, I want to do a speed round, Josh. Okay. So you and I have never engaged in this debate, but I love this debate whenever it comes up. It is, what is a sport? As in, yes. What things are or aren't sports? So let's start off with 3 fundamental ground rules, because I think everyone has an idea in their head of what is or isn't a sport. And then if we come across one that we don't believe is or do believe is a sport, but it doesn't meet our ground rules, we got to figure out why. Okay.
So then the idea is if one of us says no, then we have to have a discussion about why we think that.
Yes. Okay. And then also as a corollary, throw in there if you've ever watched this sport professionally or been to it in person. Okay. Baseball.
I have watched it on TV. I've been to it in person. It is absolutely a sport.
Okay, no problem there. I had a friend who said run, jump, swim. There's more to it than that. I found another website that basically says it has to be a human activity, because there's some things people might call sports that are not human activities. A human activity involving physical skill and exertion governed by a set of rules or customs that is undertaken competitively and capable of achieving a result.
I think my definition would be more nuanced, but I don't have one that I can pull out of the air right now because I'm going to tell you some of these things on your list are not sports from my perspective, and I have different reasons for each one, so we'll get there.
Okay, so baseball meets all those. How about rowing?
I think rowing is a sport, yes.
Yeah, definitely. Bowling?
No, I don't think bowling is a sport.
So why do you want to say that it's not a sport? Because it meets all those requirements.
There are, in my mind, and I don't know why, but there are sports and there are pastimes, okay? Like, I think the degree between, like, if you or I were to go out and play a friendly game of softball at an afternoon picnic, okay, the skill level that we would exhibit at that sport is magnitudes different than professional athletes have playing that same sport, okay?
Yeah.
There are certain sports, I think, and bowling fits in this category, where you and I can go out and we can go bowling at a bowling alley, and then the difference between you, me, and what we do and what a professional bowler can do, that gap is much, much smaller.
Have you ever attended professional bowling in person?
I've never attended it in person, but I have watched it on TV.
Me too. Dang it. Okay, so obviously those guys are very refined. They're very skilled. You know, maybe they even exercise. It definitely meets those three categories. It's a human activity with skill and exertion, governed by a set of rules and played to a competitive end.
This sounds stupid, but I think it's too easy. Like, I don't know if you can call bowling a sport.
So
because it just doesn't
one
take a
criticism I've seen of bowling is like any sport that you get better at by drinking your fifth beer is not a sport.
Well, and that's the thing is like the boundary of what is and isn't a sport is so subjective and fuzzy anyway that we're all going to disagree.
All right. Well, while we're picking on a controversial one that we can't tell why it is or isn't a sport, how about golf?
Golf is absolutely not a sport.
See, I think it is.
How is golf a sport? Like anybody, like you look at professional golfers and they're in terrible shape.
They used to be. I feel like that changed. Tiger Woods changed it when he won the Masters by 20 strokes over guys like John Daly.
I mean, no comment because I don't watch a lot of professional golf, so I don't know the average.
But what he brought to it was like athleticism.
What does that mean for a golfer? Does that mean he can run to his ball between strokes? Like, that doesn't mean anything.
It means command over your body. Like, not only was he strong enough to generate the torque on his club to hit the ball farther than their players, but he also had the finesse to place it close in his mid-game.
You're just talking about the professionalization of the sport. Like, before Tiger Woods, everybody that was a professional golfer was just really good at golfing, and he was just the first person to take it seriously.
All right. Did you know that there is a sport called professional wife carrying?
Yes, I'm aware of this. You go through an obstacle. You put your wife on your back, and you, the man, have to go through an obstacle course, which includes like going over hurdles and climbing up and down a wall. I have seen it, and I have wanted to participate.
Have you seen? You guys might be the perfect couple for this. Have you seen the ideal carrying position?
Yes, the ideal carrying position is your wife is standing up normally, and then you bend way down, and you put your head between her legs, and she bends down and grabs your torso. And when you stand up, now her legs are bent at a 90-degree angles with her upper legs like resting on your shoulders, and she is gripping you around the waist as if she was a backpack.
Right. So her butt is immediately behind your head and her face is right by yours.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking. So, all right. We're giving that one sports status. Football.
Absolutely. American football or European football?
We'll go with American football right now.
Absolutely a sport. Those guys could tear each other's heads off. Like, that's craziness.
Definitely a sport. Poker.
No.
I think I'm just giving this one based on the fact that it mainly televises on ESPN.
Now, hang on a second. Because is poker a sport? No, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no because there's no physical aspect to it. This is 100%
It's a human
mental.
activity involving physical skill and exertion governed by a set of rules or customs it's undertaken competitively.
This is the same as like chess. Like,
yeah.
If you call poker a sport, then you have to make chess a sport, and I don't think that's right.
Okay. So we just need a different name for bowling and chess and poker.
Now, have you ever seen, this is another tangent. There was somebody that tried to revise this. There was some weird sport they did. It was battle chess. I don't remember what it was called. But you would have to box in a ring for a round. And then when the round time was over, you'd have to go play chess with the guy for like 5 minutes or something, like speed chess.
We'll call it modern biathlon.
Well, and you kept switching back and forth until you either knocked out your opponent or you checkmated him on the chessboard.
What?
Yes.
People invent some weird stuff.
I kind of like that one. That's a well-rounded person that has to do that one.
Well, like actual biathlon where you cross-country ski and then you stop and shoot a rifle, like I don't know, I kind of...
We DVR'd that during the last Winter Olympics. Did you watch the last Winter Biathlon?
I've watched it. I didn't from the last Winter Olympics.
It was so fascinating.
Yeah.
I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, it really, it's interesting. So is that a sport?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Cornhole.
No.
Not a sport. I'm with you.
That's bowling, yeah.
Auto racing.
Yes.
Defend your position, sir.
Those guys have to be in ridiculous physical condition in order to control that car for as long as they do.
Wow, that's interesting because you would think that golf would be more physical exertion than auto racing.
Those cars don't have air conditioning, and like the steering that they have to do all day, like that's a lot of like torque on your arms. If you've ever gone go-karting for like 2 or 3 hours and your arms are sore the next day,
oh yeah.
Now think about doing that for 500 laps nonstop with no air conditioning and drinking water through a straw.
Okay, then horse racing.
Like you're talking about just like the sprint tracks, just the do a lap. Oh man, I'm on the fence with this one, but I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no.
Okay, so auto racing, yes. Horse racing, no.
Well, because the horse is doing all the work there. Like all you're looking for a good horse racer.
Is it though?
All you're looking for in a good jockey is a tiny person that knows how to hold on the best.
I bet some really good jockeys would beg to differ. But,
I'm sure there are professional jockeys that would like to fight me now, but they're 4 foot nothing, so they're not.
Okay, then what about equestrian?
Which is that the dancing?
Horses jumping over things.
Oh, okay. Are we just going to throw in like all of rodeo stuff, like all of the like
no?
The shooting
We'll stop there.
Okay.
Barrel racing and
so the equestrian.
This is
roping. This is just the one where they do the set course. They have to jump over the little gates and things.
Yes.
No, horse is doing all the work.
The horse is doing some of the work. I don't know how you could say the horse is doing all the work, but then the car is really hard to do. That's got to be hard to be on the back of that horse.
It's hard to drive that car. The horse, you're just telling it where to go. Like I don't.
No, you got to bend your legs. I bet your thighs are burning. You're holding on with your arms. You're giving it guidance. It's the same as auto racing.
If equestrian lasted longer than 45 minutes, I would absolutely call it a sport.
All right, so we could reverse engineer this. Somehow there's something in the length, the endurance aspect of it that makes it more sport-like.
Not an endurance. I think it's just there's a physicality to it. There is a level of physical preparedness that you have to have that separates from a sport and a pastime. Like you have to train for it specifically, not because you want to get better at it, but because you need to be in physical shape to endure it. I think that's one of the ingredients.
Well, then that really sets us up here for billiards.
No, absolutely not.
Another thing you can watch on ESPN. Basketball.
Yes.
Obviously a sport. Darts.
Obviously a sport. Oh, Ben. No, I don't think so.
Okay, I'm not going to argue with that one. Robot Wars.
No. I mean, it's excellent to watch, but it's not a sport.
Slow pitch softball.
Yes.
You kind of gave that one as an example before, a counterexample. Soccer.
I was describing like the difference between you and I playing slow pitch softball versus.
Okay.
Yeah. Soccer.
Yeah.
Soccer is like the king of all sports. I mean, dear God, I'm amazed those people.
Yeah, those
are
guys
alive.
run like 17 kilometers in 40 minutes.
It's nuts. The best thing is this joke in Dogma, where it was the angel of death talking to some other angel. It's like genocide is the most endurance intensive thing that you could do, besides soccer.
We already talked about chess. Diving.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Then what aspect of diving overcomes the endurance check that you were giving to horseback riding?
You have to be, your physicality is determinant factor in your success at diving. Like you have to be in good physical shape. If for no other reason than you're smaller when you enter the water.
I was on the diving team in high school. And one time, I was never good. It was like my freshman year. I probably needed all 4 years to actually get good. But I was overcoming 8 years of bad training at the city pool.
Okay. Because when you did they had to explain to you that a cannonball is not a good dive for diving.
Right. Yeah, even if you get the judges wet all the way from the opposite side of the pool, because that was what really brought the house down at the city pool. Yeah. Tennis.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's push the subject here. Badminton.
You see now. No, I don't think badminton's a sport.
Ooh, so somewhere between tennis and badminton.
Well, it goes from like sprinting and sliding and strategy to walking slightly faster to get over to the shuttlecock.
Okay, but competitive badminton looks almost indistinguishable from competitive tennis, other than that they exchange sides much faster.
I've never watched competitive, like professional badminton. Are there people that are sponsored by like Red Bull to play badminton?
Yes.
Why does
I don't know if it's actual Red Bull, but yeah, it's really fast and hard.
That's what she said.
Okay, so while we're going down the racket sports racket, then we'll put badminton in the middle. What about table tennis?
Yes, I think table tennis is a sport.
Tennis, yes. Badminton, no. Table tennis, yes. All right.
I love the no judgment, just the subtle reinforcement of things I say that you don't agree with.
Cheerleading.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that one. Fishing.
No.
I'm not giving it to fishing either.
The boat's doing all the work in fishing.
All right, let's do the martial arts ladder. UFC.
Absolutely.
Boxing.
Yes.
Karate.
Yep.
Judo.
Yes.
I'm getting off at judo.
Are you serious? There's still the possibility of physical damage to your person. How's that not
and
a
there's
sport?
not an equestrian?
If you fall off, that's just because you're stupid. In these combative sports, there's another human being that's trying to tear your head off.
In judo, you wear like helmets and giant pajamas that like pad your fall, and you're on padded mats.
Indicative of how dangerous it is.
Competitive eating.
No, that's an American thing, and we should be ashamed of ourselves.
These guys are conditioned. They work and practice and get good at their job.
And they should be ashamed of themselves.
Hockey.
Yes.
All right, let's go down the ice sports ladder.
Oh, jeez.
Figure skating.
Absolutely.
Curling.
Dang it, Ben. I love watching curling, and I don't want to slight those guys, but I'm going to go with no.
All right.
Just because, like, the last curling team I saw that won the gold in the Olympics looked like a group of dads that did it on the weekend.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue there. All right, speaking of sports that are televised on ESPN, the Scripps Howard National Spelling Bee.
Absolutely not. No.
Rugby.
Yes.
All right, pool sports. Water polo.
Oh, absolutely. I am shocked more people don't drown playing water polo than they do.
Synchronized swimming.
Yes, by my knee jerk reaction is no because it's dumb. But if I'm trying to apply any level of internal consistency, I have to say yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I kind of feel like that. Maybe you could give a dequalifier if you're wearing a costume, but then that would also exclude figure skating, I think.
I think there's a difference. Like, you can call it a sport for the teams that show up like on TV that are really good, that have clearly dedicated their lives to it, versus like the weekend group of gals that go to the local community pool and get a half an hour to like mess around in the shallow end. I'm not going to call what they do a sport.
Yeah, there was a girl that died synchronized swimming just like last week.
Oh, wow.
All right, back to ice sports. How about bobsledding?
Yeah, I think so.
There was a stand-up comedian, I want to say Bill Burr, I don't know why, he's like, any sport that you could accidentally participate in by being grabbed and thrown down an icy hill, it isn't a sport.
You know what? That's a good point, too. Like, how much of my own consistency are we doing here?
Yeah.
Because they do just kind of hold on, right?
Yeah. I mean, technically, if you put a couple of nobodies in a two-man bobsled and threw them down the track, they'd probably make it to the bottom.
They would make it to the bottom. Whether or not they were alive was the key. Because I have seen them.
I wouldn't want to do it.
I've seen them take bad turns, and if you flip that thing over, you could do some serious damage to yourself. So I guess we have to say it's a sport.
All right. What about WWF or WWE?
No, Ben, we're talking about sports, not soap operas. Like WWE is not a sport the same way that like Days of My Lives is not a sport.
Weren't you watching back in 1998 when The Undertaker threw Mankind off Hell in a Cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table?
And did he shatter every bone in his body?
All right. Well, someone out there in our audience appreciated that. What about e-sports in air quotes?
Okay, so I'm going to sound so hypocritical when I say this, but depending on the game, I think there is quite a bit of sport to it. Like there is a lot of it's thinking, like because they're video games, a lot of it is mental, but there is no doubt that there are physical reflexes that you have to train and hone in order to get good at certain kinds of
Sure, like a top-level StarCraft or Dota 2 player or something like that where you're...
the guys that are doing like 300 and 400 actions per second, like actually commanding, like you watch some of those and the amount of stuff that they are accomplishing at any given moment is crazy. Same thing for first-person shooters. Like the twitch reflexes that you have to build between like identifying threats and then actioning it, that's on the level of sports. Now, at the same time, there are other games where I'm wishy-washy. Like if you ever watch League of Legends or the MOBAs, there's no doubt that these guys do a ton of work and put a ton of time and resources into it. But I don't know if you need the same level of twitch responsive physical resources that some of those other games require.
So again, you have some kind of intensity threshold that divides those up.
Yeah, I think so. You know what it is? I think I have a handful of different of slider bars, and either cumulatively or one of them has to pass a threshold in order for me to call it a sport. So
okay, I like that. That's good.
There's definitely danger is one of them. I think if it's very dangerous, that should be called a sport.
Okay, dangerous, highly developed skills,
like some kind of
endurance.
Physicality. There has to be some kind of dedicated physicality threshold as well.
Okay. And I kind of like these ones that also add that it needs to be governed by a set of rules and undertaken competitively. You're not just like running, you're running a distance.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Who's the best runner? Well, how far are we talking?
Yeah. All right, let's throw in just a couple here at the end. Archery.
Yes.
And yachting. Competitive sailing.
Ooh. It's like a team sport. I've seen a couple of those yachting, and those guys are really working. So I'd say yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like our perception of this sometimes is just revealing like the Dunning-Kruger curve for an individual. Like, how much do I know about that thing? Like, if it was something I participated in, I might, like disc golf. I might argue more in favor of disc golf than you. You'd be like, what? It's just some guys in the park playing Frisbee.
My dad taught me this when I was a little kid. We were watching the Olympics for the first time. And he told me this effect where it's like you can watch, like you've never seen it before in your entire life, but you watch it for half an hour, and now you could judge one of these events and get the scores exactly right. It's like, oh, we're watching figure skating for the first time in 45 minutes, and it's like, oh, you see how their knee flared out there and their triple lutz? They're definitely going to get marked down for that. Like the difficulty is just not there. And it was really funny how that like keeps going throughout my life. It doesn't matter what you're watching. Watch it for half an hour, and you feel like you can judge it accurately.
That's because you're at the peak of the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That is what it feels like to be at the top of Mount Stupid.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now that we've established what we agree on a sport is, let's stick in the realm of things that we definitely think are sports. So we'll start with baseball. Baseball is America's pastime. It was the first sport unique to America that was invented in America. It obviously came from cricket or something there like it, small ball sports. There's a lot of them in that family, but obviously it has some problems. Like you've been, how many Diamondbacks games did you go to this year?
We've been to at least 3 or 4 this year.
Yeah,
so far.
I went to 3 or 4 Cardinals games the year before last, not this year because I moved too far away, and now I'm not in close proximity to any baseball teams. But baseball's fun. It's got some problems.
It does. Especially since the modern advent, how they implement baseball. Ever since the Moneyball revolution happened. If you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. It's great. It's the application of economics to a real world thing that was good for the sport from the players and the manager's perspective, like understanding the rules and the systems that they are governed by more completely, but worse for the spectators because they're min-maxing the system to maximize their own utility, which is to win the game, which is not necessarily exciting to watch.
I'm nominating Moneyball for our next book review.
Okay.
So yeah, baseball has some problems. It can drag a little bit. It can be kind of uninteresting. You can feel kind of detached from it if you're there at the stadium. So a couple of guys, probably over some beers, sat around and says, let's come up with our own baseball league and let's fix all of these problems with baseball.
Let's make baseball fun again.
So here are the 9 rules of Banana Ball. Every inning counts. So basically, for any inning, you either win or lose the inning, and then at the end of 9 innings or however many innings, whoever has the most points wins the game.
Well, and that's the thing. It doesn't matter how many runs either team scores in an individual inning. If you win the inning, then you won the inning, and you just get a point. Except for the 9th inning, where every point counts.
I think that has the effect of making it so that if there's like one inning where you just have a bad inning and the other team gets 10 points, it doesn't make it so that the rest of the game is meaningless. It just means they won that inning.
It also prevents the problem where you have 2 good teams playing with each other and you're there for 2.5 hours and nothing happens, where it's 0-0 from the first through the 8th inning and it's just been a slog.
Yeah. 2 good pitchers having a battle on the mound.
Yeah, okay, that's not fun to watch.
The next one is a 2-hour time limit. I mean, there have been some marathons. I remember when I was really a baseball fan a few years ago, and there was one game that set like a new record at like 7 hours or something like that. It was horrific. I can't even imagine if you're there at the park and trying to make it through that.
It depends. They stopped serving concessions in the 7th inning. So as long as the majority of that was in the first 6 innings, then you're fine.
No. It went into extra innings. Okay, the next rule of Banana Ball is no stepping out, which means no stepping out of the batter's box while taking a few practice swings, and no approaching the mound with the coach or the catcher. Like, game on. You've already done your preparation. It's time to play.
Yeah, if you want to swap pitchers or whatever, then just swap them out. If you don't get to have a chit chat with them, like, hey, how you feeling, buddy? How was your meal? Did you have a good sleep last night? This is not the time for that. People are watching.
Yeah. Rule 4: no bunting.
Yes, because I don't. This one.
I don't know if I agree. Bunting is just abhorrent and boring, but whatever. Okay, you can have it, Banana Ball.
I think they did that specifically so the infielders don't have to worry about bunting. That's a change in how the game is approached from the player's perspective to make sure that they can dedicate more resources to, like, the long ball.
Interesting. Okay. Number 5, batters can steal first base. This kind of relates to the fact that when a 4th ball is thrown, you just keep going on, and this prevents that from happening. Basically, when the 4th ball is thrown, then game on. You can run, or if there's a wild pitch or something, you can steal first base.
Well, and it turns into two things, right? I'm not sure. I forget this one. Either if it's the 4th ball or if it's the wild pitch. But you can steal first base, but the catcher, everybody on the defending team has to touch the ball before it becomes live and you can tag out the runner.
Oh, yeah. That's no walks allowed.
Oh, okay.
Basically, once they throw ball forward, then you start running, and then they have to have everyone on the team touch the ball before they can get you. It's a mini game, and it's way too gimmicky. I think it's what makes this not a legitimate sport with any kind of staying power.
Well, I get what they're going for there. They're just trying to build in some kind of artificial time limit to, like, the runner could, like, it's exciting. Like, it's a race.
You don't just have a boring ball 4 walk to first.
Yeah, it's a race between the guy running, trying to get to first, maybe even second base, and, like, how fast the defending team can whip the ball around.
And it's an incentive for the pitcher not to throw it in the strike zone.
It's true, yeah. Absolutely. Like, because the catcher's going to need that ball because he's got to whip it around the field.
So that's 5 and 6. Number 7 is a one-on-one showdown tiebreaker. Basically, once the 1 hour 50-minute time limit is reached, you go out and there's a batter, and then there's a catcher, a pitcher, and one fielder, and that's it.
Which sounds a lot like something you would do as a kid in your backyard.
Yeah, it does prevent there just being like this intense defensive battle, but sometimes that's interesting. Okay, no mound visits, and number 9 is an interesting one that's kind of different than all the rest, so just kind of tweaking the rules, and that is if a fan catches a foul ball, it's an out.
And this is 100% just to make sure that the fans are engaged with the game. Like, you're paying attention the entire time because you're kind of playing.
And of all these rules, Josh, I love this one the most. I know it flies in the face of everything that makes a sport legitimate, but I would love it if you could have an out B because the home team caught the ball. And if a ball was flying at you and it was someone your team hit it, to be like, oops, I dropped it.
And that right there, that illustrates the reason that this could never be adopted at the major leagues.
Yeah.
Because if the Yankees hit a foul ball, I can see a Red Sox fan physically assaulting somebody in order to get to it.
Yeah. All right. So they came up with these irreverent, kind of fun rules to try to solve some of the problems with baseball. I think they went too over the top. It might not catch on. I'll post a link to the video. It looks like a good time. They're laughing. They're yucking it up. They're dancing. They're celebrating when they win an inning. It looks like an interesting diversion, but it will never replace baseball.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. This is not going to supplant the MLB, but I would probably be more likely to take my kids to a banana ball game than a baseball game because
it's
they're
guaranteed to last no more than 2 hours. There's going to be some action. Yeah.
It's going to be fun. Like, we got to make sure we're ready to catch foul balls.
Okay, so let's talk about the reasons why you should change a sport and the reasons you shouldn't. I think something like banana ball, like you and I agreed, isn't necessarily trying to replace baseball. It's trying to supplement it. It's taking the fact that you like baseball, but there's some problems with it, and trying to do away with some of those. And maybe they play it in smaller markets or in the off season or something where they're expanding the market rather than being a parasite to it.
Yeah, and this is not an isolated thing either. There are like tangential sports leagues that exist out in the world. Like football has arena football and the XFL, which is getting rebooted. So there are other things that are football adjacent that you can go watch if you want to see the tweaks in the rules or whatever.
Yeah. So what are the reasons you would want to do something like this?
So it depends on if you're talking about whose perspective. So from the player's perspective,
let's talk about all of them.
Okay, so let's talk about the players first. Like, if you're a player of the game, why would you want to change it? Obviously, if you've played the sport, you have deep knowledge. Like, you understand it through and through. The reason that you're at this level of competitiveness in the first place is because you know it like the back of your hand. And so if anybody is going to recommend changes to a game, those are the people that you want to listen to.
Sure.
I feel like a lot of the changes that have happened in the NFL as far as like safety concerns go.
Yeah, that's a good one. Like, a lot of changes have been about safety.
Yes, and I think that's player driven.
Okay.
From the perspective of, I'm sorry, I'm skipping. Go ahead. You
No. Yeah, I would hope that fans also are concerned about the safety of the players, but definitely I think that's a good one. I'm trying to think of what other ones. Maybe players are frustrated with the games taking too long or requiring them to do things that would be dangerous. So yeah.
Or you end up in these weird scenarios that aren't fun to even play in or watch or be a part of. We'll talk about a couple of those, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I think safety is a main overriding concern. A lot of things could fit in that camp.
From a business perspective, like if you're the league, your corporate office, you're a team owner, there are changes that you might like to see in order to drive up revenues. You want people to come to the games. You want people to be buying your concessions. You want people to be buying your swag. You want people watching all the commercials during the games. So if you can make the game more interesting from a fan's perspective, then that just drives up your revenue.
Okay. I feel like a lot of stuff can fit into that category. Basically, making it more interesting to be a spectator, whether at home or on TV or in the park or wherever. Making it more interesting as a spectator is most likely beneficial to everyone involved.
That said, there's also things that you can change about the sport that are not for the spectator, but just for the business side. For example, Ben, have you noticed the explosion in alternate uniforms that professional teams have had in the last few years?
That's a great example where they're just basically merching out a team.
Yes. I can't even count the number of different uniforms that the Arizona Diamondbacks have now. And interestingly, like what I find really interesting is there is one uniform they wear that is, the team name is in Spanish. And I can't pronounce it, like the Serpentines or something. Uh-huh. And like it's just such a blatant corporate cash grab for the Latino demographic because we're in Arizona in the Southwest, and there's a lot of fans for both the Cardinals and the Diamondbacks.
So they're trying to capture
Mexico.
some market share amongst people that aren't traditionally baseball fans.
The NFL is doing the same thing. They are playing. There was a game that they played last weekend in London, and there is a game that they will play in the future that is in Mexico City, and it's going to be Cardinals are going to be one of the teams playing in Mexico City.
Okay, so that's one of the arguments for changing sports is to try to capture a larger market share, to get more people to watch or participate in or be part of your sport that weren't previously.
Yes. Now, from the fans' perspective, you and I, as the lazy guy on the couch saying, oh, these guys aren't in that great of shape, talking about people who spend their whole life like just being at peak physical condition, like, oh, he's too slow for this team.
Yeah.
Like, we want it to be exciting. We want to be on the edge of our seats the entire time. We don't want one of these non-games to happen where you're watching a 7-hour baseball pitcher fest. Like, nobody wants to watch that. We want
somebody
stuff to happen.
does, but not me.
Yeah, there you go.
So you want to restore or promote a sense of freshness and novelty. Some of that you can kind of do just by making changes that are cyclical in nature. Like you said, like changing the uniforms. Maybe some people are just like, ooh, a new color. That's interesting. Or, hey, that it panders to my culture and I appreciate that, or that attracts me. Or maybe there's an actual problem. You're trying to fix it. You're like, yeah, this always creates confusing situations with the rules and we need to do something about it. What would you say are some arguments against making changes?
I don't like these. Like, there's always arguments not to change something. One of the biggest arguments, we talk about this on the podcast all the time, is Chesterton's fence. Like, if you don't understand why it's there in the first place, why would you go and start messing with it? That's kind of a, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. A lot of these, like, if you're thinking about how many different things that you could change in a professional sport, like, these rule books are dozens of pages long, and any minor tweak to any one of those could have long-reaching consequences that you're not aware of at any time.
Okay. Like, unintended consequences. That's a good reason not to make changes.
There's also, of course, I would be remiss not saying, you shouldn't change things that are historical, Ben. Like, it's tradition. This is the way that it's always been done. You young whippersnappers don't have an appreciation for the way that things have been done forever.
Okay, you switch into your sarcastic voice. I want to defend it then. I think that the history and tradition of a sport is sometimes what makes it valuable. Like when Albert Pujols hit his 700th home run last week, it was historic because you're comparing him against people that lived and died long ago. Okay. And if you change the game so much that it's unrecognizable, that now his accomplishment can't even be contextualized against those guys, then it doesn't have all of that meaning and historicity. Even, like, it happened in Los Angeles in the Dodger Stadium, even though he's on the St. Louis Cardinals, and everyone in the park stood and cheered because they were witnessing history before their very eyes.
Until the next thing that breaks history.
Well, that's the kind of one that happens every 40 years or so. So that was a big deal. Like, it takes, to hit 700 home runs takes a long career.
We also talked about, there was that documentary about the javelin thrower that was arguably the greatest athlete of all time or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of the arguments they made in there is that the minor changes to the sport throughout the years have made it so that, like, some of these records can't ever be, like, broken in the future.
Okay, that's interesting.
So like, talking about this baseball hitting his 700th home run or whatever, like, there's the possibility that at some point the league says, you know what, to make things more interesting, we're going to start allowing aluminum bats. And now his 700 home runs means nothing because every other guy at the plate is going to hit a home run.
Yes. Now, there was a time, basically prior to 1920, that they called the dead ball era. I don't know if it was the equipment or just this tactics or the preparation of the players or a combination of all of those things, but it was so boring that they made like 10 rules changes to try to liven it up a little bit. And then right after that time is when Babe Ruth came along and hit 60 home runs in a season and turned baseball into something interesting and exciting again.
Okay.
Another thing about an argument against changing sports is about just embracing its flaws as lovable quirks rather than things that need to be changed.
That's a fine line. I like that you brought this up because there are things that's like, oh, well, this is because one man's strategy is another man's I hate it when this happens.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. You kept saying about like a 0-0 tie into the 8th inning of a baseball game. Some people, that's a historic pitching battle of 2 no-hitters going head-to-head.
What really grinds my gears, we haven't talked about this sport yet, is basketball. Like, do you watch a lot of professional basketball?
I used to. I lived in Chicago in the 90s. How could I not?
True. Well, I don't know if this is a modern basketball thing or if this has happened forever, but what drives me nuts is if the game is close at the end of the fourth quarter, it turns into this foul fest where it's like, oh, we don't want the other team to eat the clock, so we're immediately going to foul them.
It's this clock control board game.
It turns into a completely different game.
It's a slog, yeah.
I don't like watching that version of basketball. But I'm sure there are people that are like, oh, this is really interesting and down to the wire and nail biting. I'm just over here sitting like, what happened to the fast paced back and forth action that was happening 10 minutes ago? Okay,
good. So I was going to save it for the end, but let's talk about that one since you brought it up. So if you wanted to try to solve that particular problem, what kind of things could you do?
We're talking about there's a lot of different variables again, right?
You would make it so that the penalty for doing that on purpose was higher, right?
Right, yeah, you'd have to. You would have to switch from, like, a person can get 6 fouls to, like, a team can get 6 fouls before you start incrementing. So you're talking about the foul limit is there as the check and balance against that kind of thing, but generally teams play clean enough or officials referee in such a way that you aren't typically in danger of having people foul out when you get to garbage time at the end of a game. Yes, and that's the thing, is the rules would have to change after a certain time. The way, I mean, football does this all the time. Like, everything changes 2 minutes into the 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
Okay, like, that's interesting. You're right, it does. Huh. Yeah, if you could say, all right, now we're in the last 2 minutes of the basketball game. Now you only have 6 fouls to give starting now.
As a
team.
They
would use up those 6 really fast, and then it would go into what? You're bringing in your, like, fourth runner up on the bench in because everybody else fouled out. Like, what would it look like?
It'd have to go to like college rules almost, where it's like now if you start fouling guys, they get 3 shots instead of 2 shots. Like, you're just
jeez.
Yeah.
I don't see that one ever changing. Same with people feigning injuries at mild or even unseen contact in soccer.
Now, why is that? Okay, so I know this is a thing, and I've seen it happen, but why is that not a thing for, like, the women's soccer? I feel like women's soccer, those guys,
That's
the
a
ladies,
good question.
They just play, like, with broken arms, and the guys, like, get brushed, and they'll fall down like they're dead.
First of all, that's I'm not sure if that's actually true. It might be just a perception thing. Okay. I don't know if, flopping for penalties is a higher or lower incident in men's or women's soccer. I don't actually know.
Okay.
But I know in the game of soccer, since the rules and the logistics of the gameplay are such that scoring typically tends to be very low, and a penalty kick is a very high percentage way of getting a goal, that the opportunity cost of getting a penalty kick is very, very, very high.
Could this also be a contributing factor that there's only a handful of referees and that pitch is enormous?
Yes. So you're proposing what I think the answer is. You either need more referees or you need to do something that's kind of antithetical to soccer, and that is video instant replay.
For stuff that happened like across the field. Like, I got
for
elbowed
something
in the
that
face.
high stakes, you need to be able to prove that it did or didn't happen, and then there won't be this acting that gives soccer the bad name that it has for just people pretending they're hurt when they aren't.
This is where I'm going to introduce my hypothesis to fix a lot of these sports.
Okay.
I think that in this age of technology, there are tools that we now have access to that they didn't 100 years ago when these sports were invented.
Yes.
That could clean up a lot of this issue.
So some sports have done this. The NFL has done it. The NBA has done it. Hockey's done it. Basically, what they do is say, all right, we're going to start utilizing these tools, but we're going to only give you a limited amount. So you, coach of the Dallas Cowboys, you have this red flag that you can throw on the field 3 times in a game. That'll stop play. The referees will review what happened on the instant replays on the cameras, and then they'll issue a secondary call, either upholding the call that was made or changing it.
And if you threw it out there and we don't change the call, we are charging you a timeout. So there is a cost to actually throwing this flag out there. You don't just get to stop play for no reason.
So I want to compare soccer with American football right now. There's a very important strategic element between those two sports. American football is a stop and start game. And soccer has this enduring carry on no matter what quality to it. Okay. Like, they don't even stop for commercials. They just put them on the sidelines. which is kind of a big deal in how much money is made. So they just have to put ads on the players' jerseys.
I never thought about that as the sponsorship thing, but you're right.
So it would really go against that fundamental quality of soccer to be stopping play to try to correct officiating calls, which is why they've resisted adding more officials and adding ways to stop or review calls, which is why the opportunity cost of a penalty kick remains so high.
Well, you're assuming that my solution to the fake injury problem was instant replay.
What do you think it should be?
I think it should be pressure sensors in long pants and long shirts. Like I think if you throw an elbow and like if your elbow sensor gets jarred to the point where it's like, over some G limit where you didn't just brush a guy, you actually elbowed him, like a big red light should, like your whole jersey should change color or something. Like, hey, this guy committed a foul.
Josh, I love that idea. You completely came out of left field and caught me off guard. They did that in fencing. Fencing is a sport that's very rapid and very hard to see, and I'm sure was riddled with people pretending they didn't get hit when they did. And so they turned your entire suit into like a conductor with wires attached, and then your opponent has the other end of the circuit, and there's no way that you can have 100% certainty on positive contact in the vital areas.
Oh, there you go. So there is precedent. There's other sports that have implemented something like this.
I love it. That would be really, really interesting and would probably never happen.
Oh, absolutely not. Because then what happens if the battery pack dies? Like, there are so many ways that teams will start trying to get around this. It's like, oh, we've got a drone that flies over and jams certain spots of the field so the wireless thing doesn't go off or whatever. It turns into this whole other thing. Like, it's a cyber warfare effort now. The way that football coaches cover their mouths so that lip readers aren't seeing which play that they're going to run, which, by the way, is that really a thing? Every coach does it. But
it actually happened. It actually happened. There was a huge scandal of basically reading the lips. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so in the same way, there would be like cyber warfare efforts of soccer hooligans trying to hack the pressure suits of their team.
You reminded me of one of my favorite arcade games from back in the early 90s. It was called Cyberball. Did you ever play it?
I don't know if I did.
It was in this arcade cabinet where it's bent like at a 45-degree angle where you had two screens facing away from each other, and there were 4 joysticks, and it was a football game, 2-on-2, with a line of robots. And the tagline was Cyberball, football of the 21st century. And it was kind of like NBA Jam, where it was kind of arcade, but basically you would start out by picking a play, a running play or a passing play, and then you would control your robots on the field and execute your play. And the ball basically, instead of having 4 downs, the ball would go from medium to high to critical, and then it would detonate on 4th down. And it would destroy your robots and decimate your team, and it was interesting, but I don't know if we're headed that direction. The American football causes traumatic brain injury, it causes joint injuries, and we kind of have this caustic relationship where we like watching our gladiators duke it out, but we also kind of have to cope with the fact that we're ruining people's lives for our entertainment.
Daniel Tosh does a great stand-up bit about this, where his persona has gone completely to the side of they get paid millions of dollars a year. I don't care. Like, whatever happens to them happens, and like, you're here for my entertainment. Now dance.
But is he being sarcastic?
You can't tell with his persona. Like, his whole thing is like shock comedy, so that's just what he does and says.
Right.
But there is no small truth to that. Like, deep down, like, we want to see the big hits and the big plays. We want to hear the pads pop from the stands, and like, that's how hard we want these guys going at each other.
And we're hoping that we can like give them high-tech helmets and then just tweak the rules a little bit and make it less dangerous. But I don't think anyone escapes that unscathed except maybe Tom Brady.
I've heard some players actually say, like some prominent defensive backs talking about how the biggest problem is not that we need better helmets, it's that we have helmets. Like back in the era of people wearing like strips of leather across their forehead.
So I own season tickets to the rugby in England, and that's full contact tackle football without helmets.
Right, and that's what they're saying is like the pads give a false sense of security and make them go harder and faster. And if they had less padding, they would naturally be less inclined to, decimate each other the way they do now.
Yeah, but that's what people want is harder and faster.
I don't know. You went to the rugby. How was rugby? Full contact, no pads. Like, was it as intense?
Okay, so rugby, I think, is the parent of American football. I think the version of American football that we have that was changed from rugby, what they were trying to do is the same as the difference I was talking about, where rugby has this fluid, continuous play, improvisational style, and American football is like two generals conducting a campaign against each other where they're resetting the battlefield over and over and over so that it's very strategic in nature. It's like a chess game where I'm throwing rock, are you throwing paper or scissors kind of thing. Right. I know I just mixed a whole bunch of metaphors up, but you get the idea. American football, even though it has this improvisational aspect to it, there's also a very strategic element to it that isn't as present in soccer or rugby, where the coach coached them on the field a long time ago, and now they're out there just making stuff up and doing the best they can.
That's absolutely true. And it's different because of the strategic element. Like I was just talking about how I complain about basketball going into that fourth quarter, like constant start. Like, that's not what I'm watching basketball for. But at the same time, I really appreciate when that happens in football because the clock control in an American football game is a very strategic and important part of the game.
Right. And you would ask me, about tackling in rugby. It's brutal there, too. They get concussions and cauliflower ear, and it's terrible.
Nobody wants the cover of a Sports Illustrated guy to have cauliflower ear. That's just
You probably saw that in high school wrestling. Why didn't you get it? Did you wear the head thing?
Yeah, you were in high school. You were required to wear the headgear.
Okay, well that's because we've recognized that these sports take a toll on people. All right, I want to take a detour for a second and talk about cricket.
Talk about cricket.
Cricket plays an interesting piece in history in that it's a sport that dates back almost 700 years. But it was a sport in prominence in England at the time that the crown of the United Kingdom was exerting a worldwide empire. So, and the thing was, when they would take over a colony like Australia or Bangladesh or India or Pakistan or South Africa, there would be a garrison of soldiers who were just sitting around with nothing to do. Mostly the people were pretty peaceful, and they would just sit in garrison and think about home. And so what they would do to pass the time is they would cut some grass somewhere, set up a cricket pitch and wicket, and play cricket and challenge the locals. And so inadvertently, they set up this system where any place that is or was currently a former member of the Commonwealth or a British colony to this day still plays cricket. So if you look at countries out there in the world that play cricket, they're probably a member of the Commonwealth.
Well, I mean, that's not hard to say because at one point, the British Empire controlled 80% of the speaking population or whatever.
Right.
Now, the question I want to ask, is this the same phenomenon that caused baseball to be so popular in Japan post-World War II?
Ooh, I wonder. I don't actually know. I haven't looked that one up.
Okay.
That's for discussion by our listeners in social media.
We'll do a follow-up. We'll figure out if that's the case.
So all 10 full members of the International Cricket Council, Australia, Bangladesh, England, India, New Zealand, Pakistan, South Africa, Sri Lanka, the West Indies, and Zimbabwe, all have direct links to British colonial history or are still current members of the British Commonwealth.
Okay.
So it's kind of considered a maxim of like, if they play cricket, they used to be a British colony or a member of the Commonwealth. However, because this sport is so old, it was designed to pass the time. And so they didn't care if it lasted all day. They didn't care if it lasted all week. And so typically a cricket test, if you play it all the way out, there's no limit of overs, it can take 5 days.
Wow. That sounds like a fun sport to watch.
So you just kind of go out there the next day, and it had, the guys that play it wear sweaters and they take tea breaks, and it's no wonder that the Americans are like, yeah, we could play a better game than that with the small ball, and besides, we don't want to be identified by a British sport, so we'll come up with our own. So
this is America, man. Land of the free, home of the brave. We want our cars fast and our food hot. Bam, bam.
So you want to argue that we're still playing the same sport that was played 700 years ago, so we can say, look at what the magnitude of my accomplishment in the context of 700 years of history, like I was telling you about sumo wrestling and how good Hakuho was. But they're also like, this needs to transform or it's going to die out because it's old and boring and slow and stodgy. So there was a lot of proposals. One of them that caught on is called 2020 cricket or T20 cricket. That just limits the number of voters that can play and turns the match into something closer to 2 hours ish. And basically it's really caught on. There was a match, international match between India and Pakistan that was watched on television by 1 billion people.
It's a lot of people watching cricket.
That's 1 in 7 people on planet Earth were watching this cricket match.
That every American that's listening to this podcast, I guarantee you didn't watch it. So just think about how many people aren't Americans out there.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, Josh. So that's the awakening I had when in 2016 I was deployed to Al Udeid with a British unit and the Cricket World Cup was on, and every day they turned it on TV and stopped working and paid attention to it.
There's a war to fight, but no, hang on. The World Cup's going on.
And they would get all up in arms about calls and stuff. And I've to this day I haven't attended a cricket match in person. I haven't played one, but I definitely saw how much it meant to the British people when I was deployed with them.
That's awesome.
So baseball is America's pastime. It's much shorter history. But we did things that kind of give it this context and nuance. For instance, during World War II, when all of the players got drafted into the Army, the commissioners of the sport wanted to carry it on. So do you remember what they did?
Yeah, they created the Women's League. I forget
the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League.
Yes, there's a great movie. It's called League of Their Own.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, it's a modern classic. You should go watch that movie.
Yeah, definitely, with Madonna and Tom Hanks and Rosie O'Donnell. And I think they made a Hulu series of it or something like that.
That's coming out at some point, yeah.
Okay. And there's been the history of it is meaningful. There have been some significant cultural advancements, like Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier and kind of helping lead the way. So sports served as this proxy for the conflict of the civil rights movement in America. And we had this tension-filled but ultimately successful effort by one particular member to break in, and that led the way for people in other areas in other ways.
Not to minimize the contribution of Jackie Robinson to race relations, but let's not forget, like, he had to get hired too. Like, there was a corporation that was also sticking its neck out there in order to further, like, they were trying to make more money. So bad on them for that, but good on them for recognizing that, we can make more money even if we go outside of the boundaries of these.
Just like you said about the Diamondbacks releasing jerseys with their name in Spanish on them.
Yeah.
Okay. So it made me think, okay, so if T20 cricket has been successful and, American football has been a successful evolution, or American baseball has been a successful evolution of cricket, and American football has been a successful evolution of rugby or soccer. What are some failed ones that come to mind? The first one that came to mind was the XFL, because that kind of happened in our lifetimes and it was all in our face. So if you remember back in the early 2000s, like the year 2000, Vince McMahon of WWF fame came out with the XFL, and the commercials were brash and loud. They were showing guys blocking semi-trucks and running through explosions, and there were cheerleaders everywhere, and it was like, we're everything that the NFL is not.
Are you aware that they're rebooting the XFL next year?
I was about to talk about that, because I think they had to learn from their mistakes. Basically, they tried to target the girls that didn't get asked to the prom, the mid-tier markets that wanted NFL teams but didn't have them. So they were trying to directly compete with the NFL.
Okay.
They were just in 2018, having learned all the lessons of the failed attempt to start up the XFL, they're trying again. But they've changed a lot of things about it. Now they're targeting big markets, maybe ones that already have an NFL franchise or ones that used to or could have, like St. Louis.
Right.
But instead of targeting directly during the football season and trying to get the same players, they're trying to start the week after the NFL season.
Yeah, they're doing a couple of things there. They're trying to they've also changed the rules to try to make it more fan-friendly. So the game is supposed to be faster. There's a couple of things that they've changed so there's no real downtime. Point after kicks aren't a thing. They're just going to you're always going to be going for two, but you can go for 1, 2, or 3 depending on how far back you want to go. And the other thing that they're doing is it's not just the fans, but they're working with the league as well. Like they're trying to turn this into kind of like minor league baseball. They want the NFL to be like recruiting and drafting players from the XFL, like using that as kind of a prolonged camp to get these guys in shape.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they were set to start off right in the year 2020.
Oh, nothing bad happened in 2020 that would have like affected
so
a bunch of.
If you've been listening to this podcast for a couple years, or you've been a student of history, you've been alive, you know that that was the year that COVID broke out around the globe and basically turned anything that resembled any kind of public gathering, including most sports, into a shadow of its former self, if at all.
I love how when we talk about COVID-19 now, because it's kind of almost-ish over in America, that we either have to like just talk about it as if everyone has already experienced it and knows what we're talking about, or we have to give a quick history synopsis as if that never knew it was.
If you haven't heard.
If you're listening to our voices from the year 2342, then COVID-19 was this thing that happened.
Yeah. But it wasn't the first failed attempt to reform football. But I don't know, football doesn't feel as wrong to me as baseball does. But there's been the World Football League, the United States Football League, the United Football League, the Alliance of American Football, all failed. XFL, add them to the heap.
You have missed the most important spin-off football league. You haven't talked about it yet, and I'm ashamed of you, Ben.
Go ahead.
The Legends Football League, the
What's
LFL.
That?
Better known as the Lingerie Football League.
Wait, is that like the Puppy Bowl that happens during the commercials during the Super Bowl?
No, this is a real thing. This is
what?
It's a female football league, and they're required to wear basically bikinis and shoulder pads, and that's it.
That sounds misogynistic and horrible.
It is all of those things, and I'm completely shocked that you haven't heard of it.
Link in the show notes.
No, we'll get demonetized. Look it up on your own, people.
But this also happened in baseball, like the modern iteration of baseball, and it's interesting, was the merger of the National League and the American League that were actually competing systems and, have overlapping markets. Like, for instance, the Chicago White Sox and the Chicago Cubs, or the New York Yankees and the New York Mets, and so on and so on. The thing about that is they did, for some brilliant reason, basically, they didn't adopt a single unified set of rules.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So one major difference between the American League and the National League is that the American League retains what's called a designated hitter in their batting order to bat in place of the pitcher.
Huh.
And in the National League, the pitcher always bats.
This is taking me completely by surprise. I guess I don't pay enough attention when I do go to games.
So a few years ago, they changed the scheduling so that the American League and the National League play each other more during the regular season. And there's a thing that they have that they do when it's a National League, American League game. But for the most part, during the regular season, they just play fellow members of their own respective leagues. So if you're a pitcher in the National League, you bat. And if you're a pitcher in the American League, you don't. And there's designated hitters in the American League. And then when they play each other in the World Series, that's the way it's supposed to culminate. Historically, it's the same. Then in the World Series, then the pitchers that didn't used to bat in the American League, now they bat, and the designated hitters have to have a spot on the team. And so it kind of changes the matchups a little bit. But anyway, that's just a remnant of the fact that these were two competing leagues that merged but decided not to combine their rules or come to an agreement on their rules. And I don't know why that still persists. It's nonsense.
Yeah, that seems like an unnecessary complication.
But, all of these major sports that we consider the big ones, the football, baseball, soccer, hockey, basketball, the ones that have shown worthy of all of that history, investment, generational, national pastime, something you play out in the yard with your kid. Those kind of sports are always going to have their quirks that make them boring at times, perhaps injure the players. Those kinds of things, I think, will always be after trying to fix those kinds of things.
Okay. There's a handful of things I think that it could always improve these sports, though. Like we were talking kind of earlier. Like there's little things that we'd like to change. Like basketball, there needs to be something to do with fouling in the last 2 minutes of a game.
Agreed.
Soccer, There needs to be some better way of tracking actual injuries versus fake injuries. I think personally for football, I was thinking about this long and hard while I was watching the football game earlier today. And the only thing that I think would improve the game, I think from all perspectives, is if the ball was digitally tracked somehow, like geolocated on the field. We didn't have to rely on like the spot of refs or like, you know how there's a fumble and there's a pile of like 40 guys and they've got to pull everybody off. They don't really know where it was. And they just got to make their best guess or whatever.
Yeah, or if somebody's diving and they're holding the ball out to see if they broke the first down line plane.
Yeah, so the same way that they highlight now on the TV where the line of scrimmage is and where the first down line is, they should highlight the ball. There should be an orange dot that is the ball that I can see through all the players.
Yeah, they tried to do this back in the mid-'90s, not for the purpose of the players, but for the purpose of television viewership with hockey, where it could get really hard to see the puck.
Yes.
But for a while they had like a whooshy blue thing that followed it around, and they were tracking it, and they had software to do that. But the funny thing about that is the technology of televisions getting higher resolution and cameras getting higher resolution made it so that then it wasn't a problem anymore.
Well, for hockey, yeah, because like all the players are aware of where the ball is or where the puck is at any given time.
Once you're on a modern television rather than a grainy CRT, now you can see it and it's no big deal.
I don't know. There's not a football fan though that hasn't seen a bad spot where it's like, oh, that guy clearly like got a touchdown. I'm like, nope, first and goal on the goal line. Like they're probably going to score, but it's not guaranteed.
I also feel like you're kind of getting at the difference between technology that we might consider to be infallible versus trying to have a referee on the field make a call. And that feels like a remnant of all sports across the board. Like you have a set of rules and you're trying to adhere to the rules and you want to have an impartial person on the field who assures that everyone adheres to the rules.
Right. But the impartiality of the ref is always going to be in question. The degree of quality or experience or knowledge of the ref is always going to be in question. Like you can watch two football games with on the same day and the calls are radically different in similar circumstances because the people officiating it are different and interpret the rules differently.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll have a future where we're still playing sports that look very much like the ones we do now, but they're officiated perfectly in real time.
The only other change I think that I would implement, king for a day kind of stuff, right, is this is something that I did not know, and I learned about it watching that Hulu series about Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney's soccer team.
Yeah, when they bought the Wrexham football team.
Yes, welcome to Wrexham.
In Wales.
I didn't know this, but you could probably tell me this, in the UK, in the soccer league, if you do extremely well as a soccer team, you get promoted to the next league up. And if you do really poorly, you get demoted to the next league down. Yeah,
can you imagine if the Savannah Bananas became a Major League Baseball team?
Well, and that's what I think, like, American sports could really benefit from that. Because how many AAA ball clubs exist that nobody has any idea what they are, but they could have a lot of talent? Who knows? Right now, they're just used as kind of training fields or like bunkers or reserve list almost for actual professional teams.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of trade-offs to that. I do like the system that there's a market for the teams. Market as in things can get promoted up or delegated downward, and I did know about that. I don't know how it would work because we wouldn't want like a major team in a major market like the Detroit Lions, for instance, to like get demoted down to the next league because it would be like demonetizing them in a major, television market.
Well, I mean, maybe, but the idea there being that some other team from a different market would be promoted into their spot, right?
Then the Oklahoma City 76ers or whatever. I'm mixing two sports, but you get the idea. Some farm team from Canada in the AFL.
Yeah, the Oklahoma City Tornadoes or something. Yeah, just whatever the league there is, and they get promoted up. I mean, the market shifts. And yeah, this would have dramatic consequences for the business that is
That's what I'm talking
sports.
about.
Yeah, corporations would be like, you wouldn't hear about $230 million contracts for one player because then if the team gets demoted, we can't afford you anymore.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about all the myriad of things that sports like the NFL do to kind of maintain parity. The salary cap, the draft, all those kinds of things so that no one team runs away and becomes an unstoppable dynasty.
Well, not only that, but then there's all these problems with the inequity of it because like there are always going to be teams with money and teams that don't have money, which is another big part of the whole movie and book Moneyball.
Yeah, but that's what the salary cap's supposed to do. Every team has the same cap.
But that inequity exists not just across the different teams in any given league, but across the different leagues, across the different sports, and across the genders. We were at a WNBA game, and we literally paid nothing for the tickets to be there. And we were watching it. And it was I enjoyed that game more than any NBA game that I'd watched in a long time. And while I was there, I was looking up, what is the league minimum for an NBA player versus what does the average WNBA player make? And Ben, it was literally an order of magnitude. Like the league minimum for an NBA player was like $600,000 or something, or $200,000 or something, like something. And the WNBA players on average were making 10 times less.
So NBA athletes are the highest paid athletes in any sport worldwide, which I think is enough to give rise to a market of female athletes playing the same sport. I saw one of those man on the street ambush interview things where there's a guy with a camera and a guy with a microphone, and he'd come up to people and be like, do you know that NBA athletes get paid this much and WNBA athletes get paid that much? What do you think about that? And without exception, all the people that were getting interviewed, and I know they edit out the ones that might be exceptions, but they all go, oh, that's terrible. He's like, what do you think is you? Well, they should pay the women more. And he says, have you ever been to a WNBA game?
Yeah.
To a soul, not a one of them had. And I believe it was in a town where they had, and maybe they were outside the stadium where they played, and nobody even knew the name of it.
Yeah. I can tell you right now that I have been to 3 or 4 WNBA games, and I have never been to an NBA game.
Well, I've been to a couple of NBA games, but I've never been to a WNBA game. But I'll tell you which I've watched more of on TV and which I'd rather watch on TV.
Well, all right, so we're so deep on a tangent for NBA versus WNBA. This is what I tell people. Like, I like watching the WNBA because watching the NBA, you're watching almost like peak perfection. Like every play is perfectly executed. Like everything is going according to plan, and it's very rare that things go off the rails. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a dig at the WNBA. I'm not trying to discredit the amount of skill that these people have. It's unparalleled. I couldn't, like, they would destroy me in any sport.
Yeah.
But it's not perfect. Like, they're not paid millions of dollars. This isn't, like, all that they live for. And so, like, they make mistakes. And there are bad passes. And there are a lot more steals. And there are some air balls. And these mistakes, while, I mean, it's not necessarily that the players are worse quality, but it makes the game way more exciting. Like, how many steals happen in an NBA game? Because a WNBA game, it happens like 16 times. And it turns into these fast breaks, and it makes it good to watch.
Okay. Yeah. I can't argue with that. I don't know. I don't think I have a WNBA team in my town.
You don't even know. You're one of those people that's getting ambush interviewed on the street.
All right. Well, I guarantee that I have offended people, listeners to this program in every way possible. So let me hear about it on the subreddit or on the Facebook. If I said incorrect things about the history of your favorite sport, if I, probably mostly that. If you have something you would like to add about something you think should be corrected or fixed or made better about your sport, let's hear it. I want to hear what you got to say. So go on the subreddit at reddit.r/baditmagic or go on our Facebook page and give us your thoughts about what could make your favorite sport a better, more enjoyable experience.
If you like what we do, share us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we'll just take the stars. You don't even have to type anything out. And if you want me and Ben to sit at the top of Mount Stupid and look down upon all of the uneducated masses and talk about things that we have no idea what we're talking about from now until the end of time, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page. And one last note from me. If you are going to be in Las Vegas from October 28th to October 30th, 2022, make an effort. Come see me and Ben at the Magic 30 celebration. We'll make the effort. We want to meet everybody. We'll shake hands and we'll be awkward and nerdy. And it'll be great.
And it will be together for the first time in 3 years and record a special episode of the Bad Magic podcast that you will hear next time.
Excellent. Thanks for listening, everyone.